material to cover today. Welcome to Sole Source and Unsolicited Proposals webinar. What we're going to talk about today, this is a Foundations of Federal Business Development course preview. So this is a module from a course that we teach here at the Bid and Proposal Academy, and if you guys are signed up to our newsletter, you should have heard that we have launched our certification program for business developers, capture managers, proposal writers, and proposal coordinators. So there are 5 tracks, and we're looking to add a financial track to that as well for the pricing people. So that is the framework in which this course actually fits, but you can actually take it as a standalone. And this is kind of a little bit of a teaser. Here I'm the instructor. My name is Olesya Smachova-Taylor. I am an APMP fellow and president of the Association of Proposal Management Professionals chapter in the National Capital Area. My track record is to win $19 billion in new business for our clients, and we're also a federal contractor in our own right. I have 18 years of business development experience, including supporting 4 out of the top 5 government contractors and actually teaching to all top 5 and a lot of the top 100s. And I also recently published a book, How to Get Government Contracts Have a Slice of a $1 Trillion Pie, that came out just a couple of months ago, and it is a no-kidding, serious view into government contracting that will be useful even for professionals that looks at business development, capture, proposal development, the full life cycle of BD, and not only how to get the crumbs off the table of the large contractors, but literally get the whole slice of the federal pie. So how do you grow your company and become really efficient at winning business? So that's essentially the book. It's available on Amazon. You can get your copy. And very quickly, and not to spend too much time on that, but about our company, if you are new to our company, I know that a lot of people know us here on the call, but maybe there are some new ones. We are a little too quick. A Metro Washington, D.C. proposal house and government contractor helping businesses grow organically through end-to-end BD support and training. And we have lots of capture and proposal managers, technical writers, graphic artists. So if you have a proposal, we can help you win that proposal. We can find opportunities for you. We can teach you how to find them. We can help you improve processes. And we're also available for teaming. So we have quite a record on us. Now, agenda today, what we're going to do is we're going to right now talk about 4 goals of business development and capture, talk about sole source and unsolicited proposals module. Then I'm going to give you a quick overview of the course that we're previewing, the Introductions to Federal Business Development, the Foundations of Federal Business Development. And then we're going to continue with sole source and unsolicited proposals module. And in that second part of the module, we're going to cover the 80 SWSBs and Hub Zone. And so that's basically the plan for today. And you can ask questions throughout so that I can address them as they come up. And if I cannot get to your questions, then I will be answering them via email after the class because I get a log of all the questions asked. Now, goals of business development and capture. So let's talk about that. And this is one of the many modules for Foundations of Federal Business Development course. And before we really dive into sole source, I want to establish kind of a common framework for everyone here so that we're on the same page. What does a BDR do? Your first job as a BDR is to identify opportunities and customers. That is your first job. The second one is to avoid competition altogether, right? So what you're trying to do is you're trying to save your company and government money in, that they would have spent running and competing for competitive acquisitions. So you're trying to get vehicles to go sole source, whether you're a large company or a small. Essentially, that is your second goal. And that's also the first goal of capture, by the way. If you don't succeed in getting it to go sole source, your third goal is to reduce competitor pool. So what you want to do is you want to reduce it by trying to reduce the type of competition there may be, maybe invoking NAICS small business size limits, maybe driving an opportunity to a specific multiple award vehicle or federal supply schedule or VA schedule. Whatever vehicle that you have at your disposition, you literally, as a business developer, you have to have a palette. You're like an artiste with a palette, literally saying, all right, how do I get a contracting officer to help me maximize the chances of getting this contract to my company? How do I make sure that there's only so much competition available, that it's really streamlined? Now, the government will try to level the playing field as much as possible. You are trying to drive it your way, and hopefully you're getting them to cooperate, and everybody is going to win in the end, because it's going to get to the essentially to get the business done, to get the work done, to get the job done, to get the best pricing to the government. Get the customer excited. Get them looking forward to receive your proposal and award the contract to you once you have taken care of the goals 2 and 3. So that's really important. And get them all looking forward. And so that's about the relationship building. That's about the anticipation. And make every preparation step serve the purpose of writing a highly compelling proposal. Now, as a BDer, you kind of cover the first 4 goals. As a capture, you overlap, and you literally try to start with the goal number 2, but really your real area is reduce competition pool, get the customer excited, and make every preparation step for the proposal. So those are the areas that the capture manager would do. Now, with that said, the first goal of sole sourcing, and this is, by the way, a type of sole sourcing, is when you add scope to existing contracts. So you want to make sure that you don't spend as much money on writing proposals, and you spend the most effort on doing the actual job, on executing the projects. You want to start with training the on-site personnel to identify and need and recognize opportunities. So everybody who's working on-site with your customers really should be your eyes and ears and feet on the ground to get you the right opportunities with the client. They get you in. So what you want to do also is you want to establish a procedure to notify business development when an opportunity actually emerges. So you want to make sure that your on-site personnel actually can recognize the opportunity when it stares them in the face. You want to make sure that your on-site personnel notifies your business development so that you guys do not run silos, like your operations are in one silo and the business development personnel are in another silo. And then the BD personnel will meet the customer together with the technical personnel to discuss the problem, to discuss the solution to that problem, get the customer excited about you being the one who's going to solve that problem. And then the BD is going to identify a contract with similar tasks where the scope could be added. That's when that whole palette and artist idea comes in, when you really have to think creatively and go like, all right, where would be the best place where we could stick this piece of scope, where it really fits within our offerings to that particular customer, within what we're executing for that particular customer. And then the contract gets modified to add scope and funding. It is a form of sole source. It is very important, and there's some companies who literally get about 50% of all of their revenue from doing it that way. They don't really spend as much money competing openly for the proposals. So that is a great way to do this. And oh, by the way, before we sail on, a really helpful resource is we have a course that we do on-site for the companies. That's called Business Development for Project Personnel. And that's where we teach people not only to identify opportunities, to know how to chase opportunities, your operations personnel, but also overcome their reluctance to sell there, because a lot of technical people really hate selling, and BD is a sales job in a way. So that's where you want to make sure that everybody really understands what they're doing and they're on the same page. All right, so let's talk about sole source awards. Sole source awards are cheaper, they're easier for the government to award, because awarding a competitive contract, really, it takes a lot of work, a lot of paperwork, and it's even more than preparing the sole source contract paperwork, which can be a little tricky. And we're going to actually dive into that today, exactly how to make it easier for our government customers to do this. So essentially, this is the holy grail of government contracting, because of no resources required to write a competitive proposal. Now, you still have to write proposal or proposals. We're going to talk about that. But the difference between a sole source proposal or an unsolicited proposal and a competitive proposal is huge. You literally have to pull all stops in a competitive proposal, and it can be expensive. I mean, some companies literally spend up to $2,000 per page. That's a metric that I've heard. Now, I've seen it around a little cheaper, but literally it's become very expensive to write those proposals. And when you really talk about the task orders, it also burns out your staff. So it's tricky. So it is the holy grail. You literally get to avoid this, and there are billions and billions of dollars awarded through the no bid or sole source process. It's also the Achilles heel. I want to warn you guys. The knowledge you're going to get out of this class, if you're not already doing it and you're just looking to pick up some nuggets of knowledge, if you're new to this, know that this is the Achilles heel of the companies who over-rely on sole sources. Now, I knew this one guy. He's a customer of ours who literally built a $60 million company solely on submitting the sole source proposals and winning sole source proposals. And he really knew what he was doing, and that's what he was in the business for. But a lot of companies are in this business to grow and to graduate from 8A programs and to literally continue on winning the full and open competitions and become those huge contracting companies. And that may be who you're working for. If you're employees of the companies and not business owners, that's who you're working for. So you may be in that situation where you may be realizing that a lot of companies actually over-rely on sole source, over-rely on subcontracting, and they get to a certain point and then they shrink. I also know another company that essentially got to $20 million and then they now shrunk to $2 million and keep shrinking because they were in that mode. A lot of 8A companies are in that predicament. So if you're in 8A, if you have a lot of sole source contracts, you want to make sure that you learn how to do competitive proposals when you get closer to that point when you're about to graduate. Now, sole source contracts are much reviled in the press, and we're going to talk in a minute about that. They're misunderstood and underused by many government contractors and used liberally by others. So I really actually don't see uniform usage. For a lot of people, it's a mystery how to do a sole source contract, whereas others just literally, they're so familiar with them, that's all they do. Their streamlined acquisitions and negotiations process, instead of 60 to 90 days, you can get it done sometimes in under 2 weeks in certain scenarios. It lets the government go to the contractor that they really like and who is qualified and choose them. So, and they can, of course, reach their small business goals. Now, the bad reputation of this is because it's poor optics, right? It looks like bribery, and thank you for the correction here. I have a typo, Achilles heel versus Achilles heel. Thank you. And so that's where my accent comes out and my writing sometimes too. Thank you, John. All right, so it looks like bribery and it looks like favoritism. So there is kind of a negative perception of not saving the government money because the government really does not have an upper hand in negotiations. So they cannot play chicken with you and say, hey, I'm going to another one, because they already have this in the works. So essentially, agencies don't exactly follow the rules sometimes, so that's another thing. So there are cases when the way that the sole source is done is not by the book, so they get bad reputation for that as well. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It's just you want to make sure that you are very prudent in helping the government prepare for these and do everything the way it should be done, so you do not end up being strung through the newspapers, with all kinds of negative comments by the media and that affecting your PR posture. So that's essentially how that works. So there are lots of cases here, as you can see. By the way, I'll apologize for going a little too fast because I'm trying to fit a material that's usually like a 2-hour module into 1-hour module to cram so it can get you the most information possible in this free webinar. So this is a module of our Federal Business Development class, and we take a lot more time with this, and we do some exercises on this and have some handouts. So this is just a fast and furious introduction to sole source contracts. Now, sole source contracts have 7 authorities that, according to the Federal Acquisition Regulations, the government uses to issue them. So the first authority is there is only one responsible source. So the company has unique research capabilities, supplies, services, the government sorely needs them, and maybe there is a contract follow-on while the competition would lead to unacceptable delays. Well, there are other very similar reasons, and you can read more about that. You got to study the FAR subpart 6.3, other than full and open competition. That's another way of referring to sole source awards. There is an unusual and compelling urgency. That's the second authority. So first one is uniqueness, the second one is urgency. There might be an emergency, such as a major hurricane aftermath, or the country is in the wartime. Like, for example, you remember the Halliburton contract awards in Iraq for several billions of dollars, and all kinds of wartime-related or hurricane-related awards. Now, the third authority is in case of an industrial mobilization, any kind of engineering, developmental, or research capability required, or even expert services needed for the government from specific specialists, like, for example, expert witness in court would be an example of such an authority. Now, number 4 is when an international agreement precludes competition or a foreign government covers costs of the contract, so they want their own company basically to do the work. So there's all kinds of international agreements that may be in place that stipulate exactly what's going to happen. So that's an exception to the competition. Now, this one you're probably all very familiar with, and that's when the company's products are authorized or required by statute. For example, like the commissaries on the basis, they will have brand items and they're purchasing them. So federal prisons industries, they also have commissaries, for example, and all kinds of other needs. It's a huge industry. Qualified nonprofit agencies for the blind or severely disabled, government printing and binding, and also, finally, the 8A program, Hub Zone, and SDDOSBs. The number 6 is national security. You know that lots of things can be done in the interest of national security, and of course the public interest. Those are the 7 authorities that you got to know about. And depending on what it is that you offer to the government, you need to know exactly where your offerings actually fall within those 7 authorities, or if it's timing related or emergency related situation, you need to understand exactly how your offerings fit within that situation. So you want to know your customers' regulations beyond the Federal Acquisition Regulations. For example, if you're doing business with a DOD, here is an example of DOD regulations. Notice something here. I highlighted an emphasis here in blue. Sole source situations, unusual and compelling urgency of need, maintenance of mobilization sources. So as you can see, it kind of repeats the Federal Acquisition Regulations on the 7 authorities. Other than the public interest, as you can see, it stops at national security. Notice that contracts resulting from unsolicited proposals are considered sole source procurements. The contracts for the follow-on orders are also the procurements, so that are sole source. A lot of the times DoD, they will do the RFQ. They don't do the RFP necessarily. They do an RFQ, request for quote, and the contracting officer will perform detailed cost analysis, probably not that different from anybody else. And then there's also a financial limit here. Any such contract in excess of $500,000 will require the contractor to certify as to the accuracy, completeness, and currency of all cost and pricing data used to establish the price. So you have to know the rules. Whatever agency you're working with, you have to know exactly what they're requiring. So let's talk about the sole source process for large business. By the way, large businesses get the lion's share of the sole source contracts. It's not the small businesses, which you would think if you're a small business, you would think that that's where the majority of the money goes to, but large businesses actually get the most sole source money. Essentially the first step for large business, and by the way, for small businesses, very important that you guys understand this process as well, because elements of that process, we're going to talk about this process in detail, but when you really think about how to prove, how to help the government, how to shape this procurement, this literally translates into anything you do when it comes to sole source. You have to provide that same level of rigor and support to your government counterparts to make sure that these sole source awards happen. So you want to determine the need for sole source contract. So if the government has a requirement, if you know about a requirement, or the government doesn't know that they have a solution out there, but you have something that you could offer to them that really fits within what they're doing, what their mission is, then you want to make sure that you are in the loop. So basically, BDR either learns about a need or a BDR submits unsolicited proposal in response to an unmet need by the government. So that's the step where you are interacting very closely with the government, and you know you have to do your business development way up front in order for you to make this happen, way up front. And of course, the government is going to find money for this, so if they don't have any funding, so tough chances of this happening. So you have to do your homework to figure out if they even have any funding. Then you got to develop an RFQ or an RFP and request a proposal or quote. So the BDR will help develop a good statement of work, and the BDR will help with market research here on the government, on the company side to the government. So the government, it's their job to do an RFQ or an RFP, but that doesn't mean that you have to rest at this junction. In fact, you have to work even harder. You have to do your market research. You have to help them justify what authority they're going to use for this sole source. You literally have to help them develop good statement of work. It really should not be on them. It should be on you, where you're working very closely with them to develop the requirements and to hone the requirements, because there are all kinds of problems we're going to bring up later in this course that stem from poorly defined statement of work. Market research, that can be very tricky. Not everybody in the government is trained to do market research. And as a business developer, that should be something that is your core skill. In our class in the Foundations of Federal Business Development, we actually cover market research in detail, and we continue a lot of that discussion in our capture courses. But that's a core professional skill for this field. So that's where you want to use that to help your government counterparts to do this. Now, the third step is the vendor and BDR responsive with the quote or technical and price proposals with the good G&A footer. So G&A is a justification and approval. This is a key step in a sole source process for a large business. It's a key artifact in a document. We're going to talk about that. So essentially, you have to give the government good information so they literally could cut and paste that information into their document they have to fill out. So BDR will submit the proposal, and a lot of the times the BDR will have the support of the proposal team to put that proposal together. And then the government will evaluate the offer and prepare the G&A using a specific form that that agency uses. Every agency has got slightly different flavor of that form. After that, the government, it's completely up to the government. Now there's very little you can do at this junction. So up to step number 4 and through the step number 4, you can really, really help. After that, it's out of your hands. The government obtains the approval from the appropriate authority. It's actually defined by the regulations exactly what the appropriate authority is. It's on the web. You can look it up. And then step number 6 is the government requests procurement office to issue a purchase order for a sole source contract. So literally, it's a streamlined process, and the more you participate, the more you help, the faster that process and the easier that process is going to go. And there are a few glitches in that process that you need to avoid. Now, let's talk first about step number 1 is unsolicited proposals. Unsolicited proposals often trigger this sole source action. Now, let me see here. I have a question here from Jonathan. Jonathan, what specific services and or tools do you use and recommend to efficiently locate contract opportunities? Now, we actually cover a lot of those tools and show you how to use them in our federal business development class, but very quickly you want to input, which is the GovWin IQ nowadays called. So that's one of the places where you want to look things up. Bloomberg Government, Centurion, ePipeline. So there's a variety of sources, but that's not a lot of the times where you're going to find your actual opportunities for sole source. A lot of the stuff does not get advertised. So you need to be very close to your customers, and you need to know about their sources of funding. So there is no efficient way necessarily to do this. You have to do the legwork. You have to develop the relationships. There's no simple way to do this. Now, the question from Marlena, is there a way you will be able to email this presentation to us? Yes, as I mentioned at the beginning of the class, this will be available for download within 24 hours. All right, so back to our presentation, unsolicited proposals. Usually it's something that represents a unique or innovative idea that would not be otherwise eligible under a known agency competitive announcement. So sole source, just as a, almost like a definition, if it's under competition, if it's in a competitive acquisition process, most likely it's harder to get it as a sole source. So it's for a large business, it's almost impossible. If this is already being procured through a competitive process, wrestling it away to a sole source, you would have to have some sort of situation where it's an absolute emergency to justify that. But on a uniqueness basis, it would have to be under a, it would have to be something that the government is not procuring already. So you have to do your homework. You have to actually do a lot of research in those databases that I just have listed in order for you to see whether the agency has been buying that. Know your customer's process for unsolicited proposals. They all have slightly different flavors. So you want to study the customer first before you start writing that unsolicited proposal, before you get all technical on them and start putting a bunch of information about whatever brilliant invention that you have or whatever brilliant offering that you have or technology. You want to know their buying history and whatever they have forecasted as procurements. Otherwise, you just need to be going after that procurement rather than trying to write an unsolicited proposal. You also want to look at agency strategic plans. You want to figure out how your solution, if it's truly unique, how it's going to be pertinent to what the agency is trying to do. You want to look at their papers. You'll want to look at their information. What is it that they're trying to solve? What are their problems? So any statements also that clue you in on how to provide value to your customer. You have to learn the customer's language. You have to absolutely understand exactly what it is that they're staying up at night worrying about, and what words are they using to describe this, so that then you can give them the value. Give them a value means you're giving them exactly what they need. And when you do, it's a slam dunk to actually get a sole source award from an unsolicited proposal. You also want to know your competition, because you want to really truly see that you're unique, and hopefully you've done that before you get into this whole process. Do not oversell. So value and uniqueness, but you don't want to tell them, well, I'm the snake oil, I cure everything and cure all. And you want to follow proposal best practices. You basically want to do what you would do in a competitive proposal in your sole source, in your sole source unsolicited proposal. That means avoid overuse of jargon. Do not make it overly technical. Do not tell your chief technical person to write this proposal for you and then just edit it and submit it to the customer, or better yet, not edit it. So you want to make sure that you are not overloading it with detail like techies will tend to do. Just absolutely lose the message, lose the value in excessive technical detail. So you want it to be the teaser. You want that to be something that will make them salivate, be excited. Get that meeting with them and start those discussions so that they're trying to find the funding for your great offering. you want to make sure that you avoid the situation where you have no benefits language, and also, most importantly, technical arrogance, which is very prevalent in technical proposals. Like, we know better than you. We are the technical people. We are the brilliant inventors. We are the owners of this amazing technology, and you stupid people, we're going to solve your problems, and the condescension kind of comes across. So you want to avoid all those traps. And there's so much more in our course that we talk about in unsolicited proposals, but this is just one part of it. I have a question here. Continuing part of the sole source procurement, possibly, and it depends on how you structure this. I also am wondering, can you guys hear me? Because I have an indication here that someone actually lost the sound. Can you please confirm you can hear me okay? All right, great. Thank you. All right, so let's talk about how you can help in a step 2. You've got to help the government develop the RFQ. This is often skipped but crucial step. This way you can avoid not only a lack of G&A and protest, but also performance problems down the road. Basically what happens is, if you don't do your statement of work right, if you don't do your G&A right, a lot of the times this becomes a scrutiny. Somebody could launch a protest, and very quickly your sole source will be derailed or will go competitive. So you want to make sure that you work closely with the customer to better define the requirements, and bring your technical staff. And somebody asked G&A, this is justification and approval, which is a form necessary for you to obtain a sole source contract. So if you want to then go back to the slides, that's your step number 4, where the government prepares that. So now prepare a clear statement of work, and what you want to do in that statement of work is you want to make sure that the entire requirement is covered and can be justified as a sole source. So everything that is there, you have to make sure that whatever you're going to then be writing about it in the G&A, it is all-encompassing. So then you also want to, very early on in that stage, with your government customer, communicate and work out the plans for G&A preparation. You want to make sure you know exactly what authority you're going to be using. So you want to make sure that supplies or services to be acquired are unique to a contractor, the time is of the essence, and only one known source can meet the government needs within the required time frame. You want to determine if the data is unavailable for competitive procurement to your government contact, and it is necessary that the item is being acquired if it's essentially compatible and interchangeable with existing equipment. So there could be different reasons why, but you want to plan that G&A ahead of time to make sure that it all goes smoothly from then on. Also, in your second step, you want to make sure that you help your government counterpart with market research. Again, we go in a lot more market research approaches in our classes, but for you, just very quickly to just show you different sources, here's what the government does. I'm listing to you all the things that the government is supposed to do, so you know. And then in every step, you almost kind of shadow them and you do a better job than them. So now, by the way, I have a question here from Jonathan. Does your course contain a host of sample documents to effectively streamline many of those stages? Absolutely. We actually give you handouts on that. So contacting knowledgeable individuals in government and industry, that is the first thing that the governors will do, and you want to do that as well. So I highlighted in blue the kinds of things you want to do. So you want to call around and figure out how is this truly unique, for example. The government will review the results of similar recent market research, so should you. So should you. Publishing formal RFIs in technical or scientific or business publications, the government will do that a lot of the times, trying to figure out the request for information and as part of their market analysis. Also, they're going to query databases. So inter-agency contract database is going to be available to them, not necessarily to you, but you want to see if there are other procurement instruments that are available to you. So you will search in FPDS, usaspanning.gov. You're going to look in different repeat databases to see what else has been or has not been actually procured. So there are also a slew of other kinds of methods that you want to really pay attention to, which is participating in online communication among industry acquisition personnel and customers. So the government will set up communities where they are going to probably explore a specific problem. Well, you want to participate in that, and that's where you're going to find some information, whatever is relevant to whatever you're offering to the customer. You should be part of that. Obtaining source lists of similar items from other contracting activities or agencies, trade associations, or other sources. There are some sources you will have access to as a contractor, some you won't, but whatever you have access to, you really should have, you should be looking at. Reviewing catalogs, other generally available product literature. Now, you should have access to that as well. Interchange meetings or solicitation conferences, you should definitely attend those. And there are all kinds of industry publications, symposiums, conferences. Here are some database examples that really are helpful in market research. Or whatever it is that you're doing, you should be subscribed to those sources that are relevant to your area of expertise, to your core areas of expertise. So just a few examples of those fields. So you should be giving them that information and feeding it to them to make it easier. Fed Ops Notice. So as a part of the Large Business Sole Source Award, you will see these puppies. You can do a search if you're curious. Notice of Intent to Award Sole Source Contract. The government will make it public, and it will tell the world that that's what it's trying to do. At that point, some people may protest. Some people may show up out of the woodwork saying, hey, you know, I got something else. So you want to make sure that this is as uniquely tailored to you as possible. In this particular case, the scope of work, and based on your competitive analysis, you should know whether you're in big danger of that or not. Now, proposals for sole source procurements. So that's step number 3. The proposals are very different for sole source procurements. They're easier to do. So, but there's still a few rules that you really need to follow. So you want to avoid starting with vague requirements, which was going to lead to poor proposal quality, incorrect pricing, marginal performance down the road when the customer is going to then not like you anymore and not give you any sole source work. Technical evaluation will be limited to a review of the technical proposal. And I have here from a model market research for services besides labor rates what to use. I just listed that on the previous slide, so it would have to be very specific to your company and to your actual core area of offerings. So there are all kinds of databases out there that offer you data on different technologies, on the trade-offs of using this technology versus another technology, trade-offs of different solutions. So you want to know all the pros and cons and everything that's published in your field about that. So the technical as well as the cost. So labor rates is part of the cost analysis. So you want to do the technical analysis as well in a lot of cases. So technical evaluation is basically not going to use eval criteria like a competitive proposal does. So you want to, what the government's going to literally look at is they're going to ask, is this going to meet the full needs of the government per its solicitation or is it not? Simple and straightforward in that case, so you don't have to actually worry about all the things you worry about in a competitive proposal. Cost justification is going to be important, and that's where your labor rates are going to literally figure in this, because the government is in a weak negotiating position. When you have only one sole source, then there is in a disadvantageous position. So you need to show to them that you're really giving them the best deal. You need to justify that and not gouge them, so it's much easier to then have that contract and then continue getting good contracts. So the auditors usually will review only labor rates, subcontractor proposals, material costs, overhead, and general administrative expenses. They will not be scrutinizing it to a huge extent. And the technical representatives of the project team will perform a review of the design and production hours, which is integrated into the auditor's analysis to help provide a stronger position for negotiations. That's when they're going to be really looking to negotiate with you is, is this really necessary, is this not necessary? So the lead time for processing a sole source award can vary depending on the dollar threshold, whatever it is, and whether the item is commercial, non-commercial, whether it's available via GSA schedule, and so on. So speaking of GNAs, you were asking questions about GNAs. GNA is a document the government's going to put together, and in our course we give you a couple templates for these. They vary, and you will take a closer look at them. But they have to have a sufficient facts and rationale to justify the use of the specific authority. Remember the 7 authorities? So lack of planning on the government part won't do. So that's very important to know. So if they're in a hurry because they didn't plan something, that is not a good reason to issue sole source. So you have to have a good description of the supplies and services, including the estimated value. You're going to be helping them with that. They're going to be looking for demonstration of the contractor's unique qualifications or the situation explanation. Description of the efforts to ensure that the offers are solicited from as many potential sources as practicable. So in the large business case, that is a very important part. So, and they're going to tell whether they publicize it on FedDesOps. Contracting officer determination that the anticipated cost is fair and reasonable. And then, by the way, from a motto is a question: how successful have you been with creating sole source contracts on DoD and civilian before the RFP hits the street? We have done a few of them. They were very successful. We actually specialize in competitive proposals primarily, but we have done it for other businesses when there were situations that warranted that. So predominance of them, of course, were 8A and SDVOSBs, but there are people in our team who have done that for the large research proposals, unsolicited proposals for large businesses as well. We have a number of people on our team who are capable of doing that same thing. Is it okay to respond? I have a Robert's question here. Is it okay to respond to a sole source RFP with a tech approach that parrots the SAL? Will the government accept that? The whole point, I think, Robert, here is that you're helping the government create a cut and paste language for their GNA. You literally have to give them really good rationale for awarding this to you. So you want to put some thought and some work into that. So we're actually going to get Robert Katz. Thank you very much. I'm not going to read that question. All right. So that is the essentially description of the market research conducted. Essentially is another portion of this, and that's where you're really helping the government. And you have to have technical substantiation, statement of work, backup for the cost estimates. And as you can see, you want to make sure that your technical substantiation is there. So just regurgitating a statement of work back is probably not going to be a very good approach, Robert. So any other sources that may have expressed in writing an interest in acquisition? So if anybody has been interested, you have to declare that in your GNA, and any actions an agency may undertake in the future to avoid a sole source situation. So the government still does not want to really issue sole source for that. So what do you emphasize in the GNA? And we're all rapidly running out of time, so let me just pick up the speed a little bit to respect your time. So what to really emphasize in GNA? Uniqueness. So you want to really kind of emphasize how you are the one single supplier, one of a kind, whatever it is that you're doing. So immediacy. So delivery date or delays resulting from competitive solicitations are not acceptable, and why? So I have a question here. Can a sole source contract result from a unique response to market research or response which includes an approach to use an existing IDIQ vehicle with the customer? I'm not sure I follow the question exactly, but just general rule for sole source: if there is an actual like a multiple award contract out there and they're already procuring those types of services, the answer is it probably is not going to go sole source. It probably is going to go to that vehicle. But there are, when it comes to SDVOSBs, 8As, and Hub Zone, the contracting officer has some discretion as to how they're going to award a requirement if it's not immediately and automatically kind of fitting within that category of what goes under that IDIQ. I hope I answered your question. So emergency, delays resulting from other methods of solicitation are not bearable. You have to literally prove why. Legitimacy and inadequacy. So you can take a look at these on your slides. But to give you one example is Amazon Kindle for the second language teaching overseas by Department of State. They had a sole source for $16.5 million. And they basically have discriminated themselves against the Nook and the Sony Reader and other products, and they had to prove that they were the only one, and somebody protested, and they actually won that protest, even, and the government upheld that decision. Hasco Bastion had manufactured force protection barriers, and it was over $500 million contract, and that was a sole source because they had the only product that could meet the government stated needs for the procurement, and they literally went into the requirements exactly and described. So as you can see, those things can be really huge. What you're going to watch out for, J&A, is making sure that you don't confuse certain things, because you can do it wrong, and your government counterpart, it doesn't mean that they know how to write these, so it's up to you to guide them in that process. So you have to know that process through and through. So uniqueness and immediacy confusion. If a contractor is unique and if uniqueness is adequately substantiated, don't bring up time frame immediacy. So don't confuse the two. Time frame does not make a contractor unique. In case of an unsolicited proposal for research and development, you want to verify that the proposal represents the product of original thinking by the contractor, and it could not be obtained competitively without revealing the original thinking. So statements that the contractor has the best capability, it offers the lowest price, only qualified source, they're not a basis of sole source. And this is something that I see all the time in sole source justifications, and it's wrong because you can only determine that through competition. So that's not a very good source of justification. Now, incumbency, administrative delay, or lack of planning don't justify the sole source. So, essentially, if you are there, it doesn't mean that you should be automatically awarded a sole source. There should be other reasons that we just discussed. If the government had dragged its feet, it literally is not going to go back to the well saying, well, give it to us now because we've taken too much time. Any kind of ambiguous reasoning, you want to avoid that as well. So you want to screen that and really help your government counterparts. Now, since we're previewing the course, I'm going to take a short interlude now in the little time that we have left, and before we delve into the special requirements like the 8As, Super 8As, the SWSBs and Hub Zone, which are very useful for large businesses as well, because you've got to know what's out there. You've got to know the whole field, the whole playing field, and all the rules and all the loopholes that are in that field in order for you to be an effective business developer, small or large company alike. So before we do that, I'm going to talk about our course that's coming up shortly on Foundations of Federal Business Development. So what we really cover in the course is the professional foundation. So if you have relationships with the government, but you never got training in federal business development, or you never got any kind of formal framework in which you're working as a professional, this is a perfect class for you to put everything in a system. All the bits and pieces of knowledge that you have about federal business development, to literally put it in one structure, which is going to make you absolutely unbeatable. And essentially, it talks about the skill sets. It helps you understand what government contractor registrations are there, how to navigate federal regulations, how to take advantage of the socioeconomic program benefits, whether you're a small business or large, because large businesses benefit from the socioeconomic programs that are aimed at small businesses just as much. Leveraging small business administration and other mentor-protege programs, which there are plenty of. Correctly determining companies' business size and understanding its importance. And that's, business size is, by the way, the largest reason for protests. So whether you're a large business teaming with small businesses or small business, you have to understand the intricacies of the whole thing. How are you going to leverage different forms of selling to the government? And there are at least 8 different forms of selling to the government. And a lot of people use only a couple of them. So understanding the rules of source selection and contract awards. That's all the stuff that goes behind behind the curtain on the government side. How are you going to perform the market research? And then that's what I talked about. The market research is really important for targeted federal agencies and government contracts. How are you going to build solid government opportunities pipeline? And we really spend a lot of time on that. How do you create a healthy pipeline? All the methodologies for pipeline development, we go in detail. We show you exactly how to use tools and what are the searches one has to perform as a business developer. Because a business developer without the tools is just a marketeer who is just walking around and doing a lot of legwork and for nothing. So you have to be armed with information, and then you can do the legwork and do the great BD stuff. So it's a combination of the two. So using capture intelligence databases effectively, and what are the capture intelligence databases, how you can have them serve you, how you're going to qualify an opportunity to ensure the highest win probabilities. Any kind of must-win opportunities identification, your strategic planning, understanding of rules of marketing to the government. I just got a note that the volume went out. Can you guys hear me okay? So just please confirm. All right. Great. Thank you. Understanding building effective relationships with government customers. How you actually create those effective relationships. How you develop business development collateral, such as your capability statement, and what capability statements are effective and which are not. What you should say and what you shouldn't say. Identifying the venues for effective business development. How do you really use your limited time as a business developer to market to your customer most efficiently, and how you're going to target potential teammates. Those are just a few topics. We actually dive into a ton of detail in those 2 days. And today you can get $200 off the upcoming Foundations of Business Development courses. There are 3 of them. One of them is coming up on January 23rd and 24th. Another one is May 7th and 8th, and October 7th and 8th is the last one of 2013. So it's a live 2-day training in Rockville, Maryland, or alternatively, you can actually take the class via webcast. So if you don't want to travel, or your company is not going to pay for travel, you can sit there via webinar and be connected. You will see the instructor teaching, you will see the slides, you will follow along, you will participate in exercises via group activities. So everything but just will be remote. And you can use the coupon code. It's valid until 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, January 20th, and it's SOLS Web 1501. So just use that coupon code, and it's going to be much more affordable for you to take the class. So it's $200 off. Do take advantage of that offer. So with that, let's get back to our presentation. We only have 3 minutes left, so I will do as much as I can. We still got a lot more to go, and I will try to wrap up quicker, but for you guys, you can actually see it on the slides. We'll get you the slides, and there will be more in our class. We actually get into a lot more detail. There's just way too much information on the topic. I was looking at which module to really plop out of the class and really share with you to give you a good preview of what we teach. This module really seemed logical, but even that is a little too much for the 1-hour format. So 8A sole source limitations. Let's talk about that. The sole source award can be made to an 8A up to $4 million in services and up to $6.5 million in manufacturing. Now, what you should know, and especially if you're a large business or in a teaming situation, small business in a teaming situation, is there are Super 8As out there. Super 8As are an 8A Alaska Native firm. We actually had a couple sign up for this phone call. Just a shout out to you guys. An 8A tribally owned Native American firm, or an 8A firm owned by a Native Hawaiian organization, NHO. If you guys are looking for some, actually we know some fabulous companies that we work with and can match you up to those. They have unlimited contract value, no protests allowed for the sole source, according to the regulations. So the written G&A is required for awards over 20 million, however, according to the recent laws. Some agencies require G&A for anything over 4 million, which is incorrect. It literally is the $20 million threshold for requiring that. And in those G&As, you don't actually have to justify your uniqueness, but you have to document why sole source. So if you actually are helping the government, so this is the minimum G&A requirements for the contract over 20 million per the regulations here in the pay. And that's what you got to go through. So for you guys, when you're teaming, take that into consideration. Now, sole source process for 8As. Let's go through that, and then we're going to conclude the class after that. And then you can look at the slides after that, and hopefully you attend our course to find out more. So the government identifies the requirements, decides to sole source, develops a SAL, prepares a government estimate, and obtains funding. What do you do during that time? Well, you're supporting them along the way, the entire time. You help develop the statement of work. You provide inputs, level of effort, time frame requirements to develop an estimate. So you're literally working with them very closely. You're not just hoping that they will do a good job putting that together for you. The step number 2 is the government program manager or interested party chooses your 8A business to perform the work and submits a procurement request to the agency contracting officer. So what do you do at this junction? You want to help them prepare the package with requirements, descriptions, estimated period of performance. So you're not necessarily doing the package preparation unless you have a super, super duper relationship with them and you can do all the paperwork for them. But you're giving them all the fodder for that. So you're working with them very closely to make sure it's all shaped the way that you need it to be shaped. So the agency contracting officer in step number 3 is going to prepare and submit an offer letter to your designated SBA business development specialist. And in our course, we give you a template for that offer letter. So that's a very important step. And then SBA processes the offer letter and returns it to the agency contracting officer who submits the statement of work, RFP or RFQ to your company. And then you write you provide either the quote under the simple acquisition threshold or you submit a proposal, which is technical and cost proposal. And it's a very simple, sort of straightforward type of process, not the same as your competitive proposal. And then you finally negotiate and plan the project scope with your, with the government. The government negotiates this with your company. So now I have a question here. Is there a J&A needed for regular 8A sole source contracts? No. The answer is no. That's the cool thing. You actually don't go through that process. And also, your slide says government decides to sole source. How is that decision made? You actually help them make that decision. And a lot of the times, if they're really experienced, they make that decision to meet certain goals. They can work with you if they really want you. They can suggest to you that. But generally speaking, you should know opportunities to sole source, and you should be driving that decision. That's why you're learning this in this class. And what is a simple acquisition threshold? Well, that is a threshold under which the government doesn't have to go through any kind of serious process to award the contract to you. To recommend a resource, you can get my book. It actually explains simple acquisition thresholds. We talk about them in detail in the class. General, very standard simple acquisition threshold is $25,000, and for certain agencies it's $100,000. So it really depends on whether the agency is using a certain electronic system for procurement. So it varies, and that's essentially kind of in a nutshell. But there's just a little bit more to that in the rules. Actually, quite a few for micro purchasing, and then this for simple acquisition threshold. So. Now, let's see here. The entire process takes less than 2 weeks. And that's what's so cool about the 8A sole source process, that the entire process actually is fast, it's streamlined, and it's furious. So with that said, you guys, you're going to get the slides. So we actually don't have the time to really finish this. I wish we did. Let me see here. I'm going to just conclude the class and remind you, get registered for the course. And if you cannot make the February course, get the May course, get the October course. because we don't have those savings and special offers all the time. And we also have our cool sale on the certification from the Bid and Proposal Academy that is only till January 31st. Check this out on our website. We're under Bid and Proposal Academy, and that way you can get the whole slew of courses that a federal business developer should have in their set of skills that they have to possess in order to be deadly effective at winning business. So that will give you a great foundation, and it's a one-time only sale because we just launched the program. It's like you get like almost 60% savings from all the courses that you actually take. So it's a really cool way to do this. So, but for this course, to get $200 off, it's SOLS Web 1501, and I really hope to see you all there. Thank you very much for attending this course. We're going to post the slides. If you have any more questions, shoot an email to you. Oh, sorry, to me. Shoot an email to me, and call me on my cell if you need to, or the office number, schedule an appointment. And I hope this was very useful to you. Thank you very much for sticking around and attending, and I hope to talk to you all again. Take care.